Hi there everyone, and welcome back to this three-part tutorial for absolute beginners on the A to Z of jesmonite. If you've never heard of it, let me show you what it's all about and how you can use it to create elegant home decor. So what is jesmonite? Well, for some of you watching, it's probably new to you, and others you might have already seen it being used before. Jesmonite is a two-part mix of a gypsum-based material in an acrylic resin. It's water-based, so it's eco-friendly, it contains no VOCs, it's really easy to mix, and it dries hard in only 20 minutes. Once opened, you'll find a booklet that also includes a really useful measuring chart for working out the ratios. The liquid comes in this really handy screw top, and the jesmonite powder is in this sealed bag. And what I like to do is I like to pour the powder into the bucket and I store it there. And for easy scooping, I leave this plastic spoon inside. And this is just a baking spoon that I've raided from my kitchen. So apart from the jesmonite and the liquid, you will need some stirring sticks, and I'm using these forever sticks, which are really perfect for cracking off dried up jesmonite and saving for later. I am also using the forever cups for the same reason. And for colouring the jesmonite, you can use any of Mrs. Colourberry's pigment powders or her pastes. You can even use gold leaf, glitter, cracks and drizzles for some extra bling. I like to use this pouring cup just for the liquid part, and I always keep this apart from the jesmonite cups. You can also use any type of silicone mould. These are the best ones to use because they don't stick to the jesmonite. For this little pot, I'm measuring out 33 grams of the liquid and 82 grams of the jesmonite powder separately into two different cups until I'm ready to mix the two together. This will save me some working time. And talking of working time, it's useful to know that it's much shorter than for resin. So jesmonite takes about 10 to 15 minutes after mixing it before it starts to cure. But I usually like to get everything ready so that I'm not nervous about the working time and I don't feel rushed. I find using an electric kitchen scale the best way to weigh out all of your ingredients, including the liquid, which I do weigh out in grams as well. I've raided my kitchen for this old spatula, and a small whisk is also handy too. It gets rid of any of the lumps better than just a stick. So now that all the detailed explanation about jesmonite and how to weigh it out is done, let's get on with the creation. So as you can see here, I've got 33 grams of the liquid and 82 grams of the jesmonite for a total of 115 grams of, let's call it batter. It's kind of like a cake batter. And for some extra bling, I'm just pouring on a little bit of this glitter. It's a teal glitter, straight onto the mould, and I'm just going to rub it in a bit. This is just one way you can add some glitter into your jesmonite. You can also mix it into the mix. I like to add the pigment powders directly into the jesmonite powder. This gives me a kind of an indication of the colour that it's going to be, but just know that it does darken slightly when you add the liquid to it. So I'm adding the liquid, and I've put in about a total of a teaspoonful of this Karat teal pigment powder. And I'm first going to use the whisk to whisk it around. And I find that this gets rid of the initial lumps. And yeah, I'm going really hard there. That's the best way to do it. This isn't like resin. You actually want to mix really fast and make sure that you really spin around to get all of those lumps and bumps out of the jesmonite. And then just to finish off, I like to take a stirring stick, and I use these forever sticks, and I just am getting into sort of the sides and up around where some of the jesmonite might be stuck on the corners. You can mix for a total of about 2 to 3 minutes without being worried of using up your working time. It's not really a problem. And then I'm going to go straight in to pour, and what I like to do to make sure that there are less bubbles at the tip, which is the bottom part of this mould, is to really bang it. Like, give it a good old bang. It's not necessary to use a heat gun or a torch lighter because this is not resin and the heat will not pop any of the bubbles. So this is the best method to get rid of any of your bubbles, is that you pour all of your liquid in and then you give it a good old tap. So sometimes using a straw to blow the surface bubbles helps, but it doesn't get rid of all of them, but it will help you sand down less afterwards, so it's worth doing. I also have this little gadget, and you might ask me what this is. Well, this is a back massager which I got from the sports shop, and this vibrates, and this is really good for popping out any of the bubbles. So I kind of use the little end bits all around at the bottom, especially at the bottom, and on the sides, and this generally gets rid of quite a majority of the bubbles. I am going to leave this to dry for an entire 20 minutes without touching it, and then we'll be back for unmoulding. Whilst this is drying, I am going to show you how I clean up all of my utensils. I just pour a little bit of water, just plain tap water, into a cup, and I like to scrape off all the excess of the jesmonite straight away after using it. This is the best way to do it. And then I'm doing the same thing with my spatula. Usually I would take this down to my kitchen sink and I would just wipe it off, but just for demonstration purposes, if you just take a little bit of kitchen paper and scrape it off, if you do it straight away, you can then use this right away for another project. So the beauty about jesmonite is that it really does cure in 20 minutes, and this is just fantastic when you want to unmold and then go off and do another moulding. What you should know is that you shouldn't leave it in too long into the silicone mould, because it does create sweat patches. So the best thing to do after you've unmoulded is to turn it upside down and let it dry off in the air. And what I'm doing here is I'm just scratching the surface just to test if it's done. If it wasn't done, it would scrape off. But as you can see here, it's done, and what you can't feel is that it's actually very, very warm to the touch, which is quite a good sign. And what I'm going to do is just turn this upside down and let it cool. So another tip is don't throw any of your bits that are left over. I'm going to use this for terrazzo later. And I'm just scraping this off the table, and I'm putting it in just a dedicated cup that is got blue, extra blue terrazzo flakes. So now I'm going to make a matching coaster to go underneath the little pot. And just for fun, I've added a little bit of glitter and some ocean cracks into the bottom of this mould. So for this preparation, I have mixed up 46 grams of jesmonite and 19 grams of the liquid. And because I want this to be clear, I'm not adding any powders or pastes. I'm just going to add in these flakes straight into the mix. If you like, you can crush them down with your hand to make them smaller, or you can keep them large. So this is the easy part. You just pour in the liquid into the jesmonite powder, and I'm going to once again use my whisk to initially whisk it up to make sure that all the lumps are not there. And then I'm going to get my forever stick and just poke along the sides and make sure that there's no jesmonite powder hiding in the corners. Once I've done this, I'm going to add the little chips of leftover dried up jesmonite straight into the batter. I'm going to mix this around, and then very simply I'm going to pour it into my coaster mould. So the best way I find to do this is just to tap on the base and then slowly pour in. I don't like to pour all the way in because I'm always worried that there are some naughty bubbles hiding underneath. I am sure I'm going to get some very rude comments about this back massager, and all the more welcome. I have a sense of humour, so go for it. And sometimes what I do is I actually just lay it on the table and let the table vibrate, and that way the bubbles from right underneath the coaster or the silicone mould and gets into the little crevices underneath. Now when you're doing terrazzo, you will need to sand down, and sanding doesn't sound as hard as it is. I actually find it quite therapeutic, but then I am strange like that. And I'm going to once again let it completely cure for 20 minutes before unmoulding. And then we can finally unmold this beauty. And what I like to do is just dig my little nail inside and make sure that it's completely dry. And then you can unmold, and if it's warm to the touch, that's usually a good sign. For sanding, I usually prefer to use wet sandpaper, which you can buy from Amazon or from your local DIY shop. But just as a demonstration, I'm going to use some regular dry sandpaper and kind of like to show you why I prefer wet sanding. So it does kind of do the job, but it does leave a mess of dust all around in your room. So I'm going to do a first pass on the bottom of it, and as you can see when I turn it upside down, it's starting to sand back the jesmonite, and jesmonite is quite easy to sand back. So don't be too afraid of doing it, and if you prefer you can use gloves on this part. And so we're getting there on the sanding, but I am going to now switch over to my wet sanding. And I buy a sort of a paper pack of wet sanding, which goes from about 600 to up to, I think it's 3000 grit. And this is a special paper that when you get wet doesn't flake apart and fall apart as regular sandpaper would do. And you need to add quite a lot of water to it to do the effect. And the best way to do this is actually to dip it into a little bowl of water, which is what I'm going to switch on to now. Now, because I'm doing this on the table, my table is shaking around quite a lot, but this would be the best way to do it. But I am going to lift it up and start to sand in the middle of the air just so my table doesn't shake too much. But you can see that we're already getting down to the chips part of it. So those are the blue chips that we put in. And what happens is that jesmonite will cover a layer of clear jesmonite over it. And what you need to do is sand back to reveal the terrazzo effect. So here I am with my little, well, it's just a little cup of water, a big cup of water, and I am going to sand all the way back until we get all the terrazzo flakes to show. And you can see that even those little ocean cracks are starting to peek out. They were previously buried under a little bit of jesmonite, and I think it looks gorgeous. So I'm going to keep going with this. And just as a demonstration, I am going to start to wet sand the regular sandpaper just to show you what happens. Eventually, the actual bits of sand that are on the sandpaper will start to flake off the paper and land up inside of your jesmonite. So it's probably not the best type to use because that could actually encrust into the jesmonite eventually. And also that paper behind there, it started to disintegrate as it's just paper. So I'm going back to my special abrasive wet sanding paper, and that's going to give me the best effect. And you can keep going until you get the desired effect that you like. And I'm going to do the exact same thing with the underneath of the little pot. And this is really quick to do, and it will just level down all of the little extra bits that were hanging off on the sides. And there, all nice and level and smooth. Now sometimes you might want to go over the sides, especially as in my case I've put some glitter on. Just give it a little sanding on the sides just to bring out the glitter. If you're using these as pot plants, it's best to seal them, and let's move on now to the sealing part of jesmonite. To seal all of these, and especially the inside if I'm using them for plants or for candles, I have found this water-based sealer. It's an acrylic version from Amazon. You could also use some regular acrylic varnish or some furniture wax, which I have there just in front of me. I like to use these little handy mousse sticks, and that helps me get into the inside. It dries pretty quickly, so if you do one layer, let it dry, and I like to do a total of 3. If you wanted, you could leave it without varnishing the sides, but I just like the extra level of protection on the outside, just in case some water spills on it. I also wait until the sides and the top are completely dry, and then I turn it underneath and I do the bottom part of it. I'm going to do the same thing for this coaster. And here's just another selection of other little pots that I've done and coasters, and I'm going to take the opportunity to varnish them all now and give them all a good waterproofing protective layer. This one I've used a little bit of gold leaf at the bottom, and the black one I added lots and lots of grey glitter to it, so it's got some lovely sparkle. And here is a fun kintsugi style coaster that I've put some gold leaf, a little bit of glitter, and I've used lots of black pigment and paste to colour the jesmonite. This is another version using some mica flakes, and this is another kintsugi version with some purple mica powder inside and some gold leaf. I hope this has inspired you to create your own jesmonite home decor and tableware. They make great gifts and they definitely impress. If you would like a copy of the ratio chart, which is free to all of my YouTube and Instagram subscribers, please find the details in the description of this video or in one of my Instagram stories. If you haven't already, please do like this video and subscribe to this channel and follow me on Instagram for more. I wish you all a great week, great weekend, take good care of yourselves, and I'll see you in part 2. Bye!